Hey everyone, I'm Jack. Welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to talk about something many people have heard of but don't fully understand, which is API. This video is not a technical API tutorial. I just want to explain in the easiest way and teach you how to make API call in N8N. So this video will include some examples and show you how to actually use APIs in N8N. So first off, what is API? Imagine an online service is like a convenience store. So normally, how do you interact with it? Of course, you walk in through the front door, browse the shelves, pick up the products, and check out. And this front door is what we call the front-end UI, which is the website interface you see when you open the page. But besides the front door, this store also has a back door, usually used by the employees or the suppliers. And through this back door, you can directly grab what you want from the storage room without entering the store or waiting in the line. This back door is the API. So let me give you one more example. Usually when you want to input data into Google Sheets, you come to this website, open your spreadsheet, and type in the data manually, right? But actually, Google provides a backdoor, which is the API where you can send the data to it directly. And you don't even need to open this Google Sheet and your data gets inserted automatically. For example, if I come to N8N, I have this API call, which is also a inbuilt node from N8N created already in this workflow. So if I come to here and I click test step, so this workflow is executed successfully. And then if I go back to the Google Sheet, you will find I have a new row append to this Google Sheet. So basically every API is like a door that leads to a specific shelf. Just like I showed you, the door was used to add a row of data to Google Sheets. But if you want to delete a row or perform other actions, you need to find a different store, a different API endpoint. But here comes the problem. You don't know where the doors are and how to open them. So that's why each service will provide you with a menu, which is called the API documentation. The API doc will tell you which doors you can access and what each door provides, which is the data you can get or the services you can do, and then what key you need to unlock it, which is the API key, password or token, and finally how to open the door properly, which is the request format, parameters, or methods. So some doors use keys, some have electronic locks, some need a password card, some doesn't even require a log. It all depends on the API, which is why you must read the documentation. But not all APIs are open to everyone. Some platforms only provide APIs to paid users or require you to add funds to your wallet before you can access them. So make sure to check the API documentation before make any requests. And in the following session, I'm going to show you a free public news API, the one we have used before, which is NewsAPI.org. And this time I will start from scratch and walk you through how to read the API documents and use it in N8N, fetch the latest news. But before that, let me introduce my new product.
Want an easier way to subtitle viral shorts? Just paste the link. Our system takes care of everything. Detect, translate, and subtitle across multiple languages in seconds. Curious to learn more? Check out my Patreon for a live demo and all the details.
Alright, now let's get back to this tutorial. So right now we're going to make a simple GET request to fetch the latest headlines from this NewsAPI.org. I'll put this link in the description so you can come to this website and follow my steps. So when you come to this webpage, you will find three things that are most important. The first one is get API key, which is the most important thing when you do the API request. The second one is the documentation, so you need to understand how to do the API request. The last one is the pricing. But for this service and this website, I know that the API request that we're going to do today is free of charge, so we don't have to worry about the pricing. So we can now just dive into get the API key. So after you do some registrations, you will get the API key and you will have this page. So this will be your API key, and then we're going to use this in our API request. So make sure that you copy this API key, put it somewhere safe, and don't disclose it to anyone. What I'm doing right now is a very bad practice. I'll show you all my API key, which is a bad stuff. Especially when you are doing some other services like you are playing with some AI APIs, make sure that you don't disclose your API key to anyone because you would top up your wallets, right? So you will have your money inside your API keys. So make sure you don't disclose the API key to anyone. So once you save this API key, then we'll go back to home and then check out the documentation. So in here, the first thing we usually check is the authentication. We come to here, you will see this web page already put my API keys in here. So we will see my API keys in here, and then on the right hand side, this is an example of doing one of its endpoints, which is the thing that we're going to talk about right now. So now let's click this endpoints, and then it said NewsAPI has two main endpoints. The first one is everything, which is to get all the articles, and then the second one is top headlines, which is to get the breaking news headlines for countries and different categories. We're going to do the first one, which is everything. We click on this. On the left hand side, you will see there is a request parameters. So these are something that we have to fill in when we're doing the API calls. But before we get onto that, we will first look at this live examples. Usually a good API service or a good API documentation, they will put some examples on the right hand side in here and show you how to use this endpoint, like what kind of parameters you have to put in there, what are the methods, what are the URLs, and how to put the API key in there, this kind of stuff. Actually, by reading these live examples, you will be able to know how to make the API requests to these endpoints. So now we will go to N8N. So you will come to a new workflow, click on this add button, and then on the right hand side, we search HTTP requests, which is the first one in here. Click on it. N8N built this node for you to do the API request. So actually it covers all the stuff that you need to put in here when you do the API request. So first one is the method. When I open it, you will have a drop down menu. There are lots of things that you can pick. So usually we will do a get or post in here. And sometimes if you are dealing with the database, you might do delete or put in here, but these two are a bit rare. Usually we will use get or post. Post is more often, but in this tutorial, I'm not going to explain the difference between get and post. So if you're interested, you can go check out some other YouTube videos. So I assume we don't know what is get and what is post, but we know that we have to put something in here, right? Let's go back to the documentation, and then on the right hand side, what you see. So you see that we have get and then a URL here, right? So actually we can assume that we're going to do get in here. And this is also the correct answer for this endpoint. So we'll come back to N8N, and then for the method, we do get for this time. And then for the URL part, let's get back to the documentation, and you will find something like this as an URL, right? Because you see HTTPS and then something behind. So this should be a URL. So actually we can just copy this, put it back to N8N workflow in this node. Then we have already finished these first two parameters. And then what next? So we have authentication. Authentication is something that we put in here for our API. So if you are my Patreon members or you have been using N8N before, then you should be familiar with this, because when we are dealing with some AI or some other API calls, you have to come to here and then put the API keys in here, right? But for this time, because if we go back to the documentation, on the right hand side, you see API key is required. So you have to put the API key in N8N node, all right? Otherwise, it doesn't know who you are when you are making the request. But if we look at the URL, you will see that there is a API key is equal to, and then this is my API key. So actually we have somehow put our API keys in there already. So that's why for this time, we don't have to take care of this generic auth type. So actually we can put this authentication as none, and that's it. Okay, now what next? So we have query parameters, headers, and body. Okay, now let's go back to our documentation. In here, what you see request parameters, right? So these are the stuff that you can do with these API calls. And then for the first one, this is API key. This is required, so you have to put this API key when you do the API calls, which is something that we did already, right, in the URL. So we can skip this one. And then the second one is Q. So this is the keywords or phrases to search for in the article title and body. So if you want to do this parameter, you can put this Q and then add this parameter in our API calls. I will show you how to do it. So let's go back to N8N, and then in here you will see we have three things to do, right? But you don't know what to do. So we'll try to find out the keywords and see what should we do with these three things. If we go back to documentation, the first thing you see is request parameters, right? So we can assume that we are going to do something with the parameters. If we go back to N8N node, you will see we have sent query parameters. I assume we can use this, right? So we can click on this, and then you will see we have to put the query parameters in here. And then for the name, what is the name? If we go back to the documentation, you will see that we have to put Q in here, and then the value should be the keywords or phrases to search, right? Which makes sense. So if we go back to N8N, if we put Q in here, and for this time, I want to search something related to stock. So by doing this, we should be able to get some news which is related to stock. So this is how we do with the parameters. And basically, we have filled everything. We filled the method, URL, authentication, which we don't have to do it in here. We put it in the URL. And also we did the query parameters. Actually, we can do test step and go ahead to get the news. So if I click test step in here, you'll see I got some articles, some titles, descriptions, and the URL to that article. So congratulations, you have already made your first API call. But there's one thing. Remember we put stock in the query, right? So we try to find some news related to stock. But when I check the articles, they are more like Bitcoin related articles. So what is it? If we check the URL in here, you'll find that we have a Q is equal to Bitcoin in here, which means when we first get this URL from here, this documentation is already showing an example of getting some Bitcoin related news. So that's why if we put the query parameters in this level, this stock related news is not being fetched. So now let's tweak our URL a bit and also try to understand more about what this URL is. When you're making an API call, the URL is divided into 2 or 3 parts. So the first one is the standard URL to that web page or to that web service. You will see in here, we have https NewsAPI.org. So this is the link to this web service, to this News API. And this is standard. If we do any other service, for example, if we want to do the top headlines in here, this URL stays the same. You can see in here, we have NewsAPI.org. But the thing that would change if we want to do different service is the second part, which is the one in here, read to everything. So what does this mean, read to everything? If we go back to the documentation, we click endpoints, you will find that News API has 2 main endpoints. First one is everything. Second one is top headlines. And then this in here is actually the API endpoints. So endpoints is like different service that this web will provide. For example, so this News API, it only provides 2 services. The first one is to get everything, which is every article. The second one is to get the top headlines, which is the breaking news. So since we have a default URL at the beginning, then if we want to access to different service, they create 2 endpoints, which is also a part of the URL. So by tweaking this part, you will be able to access to different service that it provides. So for example, if you want to do Google Sheets, you want to add some new data into it, then they might have a different endpoints for this. Maybe like adding rows as the endpoint. And then for the other service, like you want to delete a row, then there will be another endpoints for that part, which is a different name, maybe like delete row as the endpoints. So you have to remember endpoint is like the specific service route. If we put the correct route in here, then you'll be able to get that exact service or data. And then we have another part in here. This is different for all the services. For example, because we're doing News API, so we might have something else in here. If you're doing Amazon or Google or any other APIs, they might have a different format. So you have to be careful about this and make sure you read the API documentation. So in here, you will see we have Q is equal to Bitcoin, which is something we talk about. So this is how we target the specific keywords for the news. So actually this should go to the parameters, but it is fine if we put it in here. And then we also have the API key. because it is a free API service. So I guess they make this URL or make this API request easier when they do the design. They want to put everything in the URL, and then you don't have to put the stuff in authentication or in under query parameters. So I guess this is what they want to do. So by doing this URL, you'll be able to fetch the data or news that you want to do without touching the other parts. So you just have to do method and URL, and that's it. So I guess this is what they want to do. So it is what it is. Just a reminder, most of the API service, they don't put the API keys under this URL, because when we are doing an API request, we will send this URL in our package when we're browsing some server. So this data in here would be visible to everyone. Actually, it's so easy to be hacked by someone, and then they will know your API key if you put it in here, and it's not a good practice. So usually they will put the API key in authentication and try to encrypt the API key so that the hackers won't be able to get your API key that easily. And also the same for the parameters, because you might put some sensitive stuff in here, depends on the service or endpoints that you are doing. So for example, if we remove this Q is equal to Bitcoin, and then if we run it again, then we will be able to fetch some news articles that are related to stock. And you can see here, we have stock up on supplies as the description. And then for the second one, in the title, we have switched to stock on launch day, which is also a keyword stock in here. So this is how you make your API calls. I'm going to show you one more thing. For example, if we want to add one more parameters, how do we do it? For example, if we want to check out this language and we only want to search some Spanish news, okay? Then what we would need to do is to come to here, copy this language, go back to N8N. In here, we add parameter. We paste the name in here. We go back to the documentation. So this is the ISO code for the language. We want to do Spanish, so we'll copy ES in here, paste it back, and then we will do a test step. So you will see we have some news in Spanish. So once again, we have successfully made the second API call, and we are able to get some Spanish news. If you're interested, you can check out this documentation and then try to do some parameters that you want to do, and then just follow my practice, put it in here, put a name, put a value, then you'll be good to go. So that's it for the first part. So we have successfully made our first API call with this NewsAPI.org. This is a easy one. So today we have learned how to make a simple API request and how to read its documentation. We covered method, and for this time we use get, and then in the next tutorial we will try to use something else. And then for the URL, you have already know that we have a base URL, which is the base service address. And then the second one is the endpoints, which leads to the specific service route. And then we also know how to do the API key for authentication. And finally, we have done the parameters for customizing the request. So in the next episode, we will explore a more advanced API integration, a brand new image generation service from xAI, which is Elon Musk's AI company. This new image generation service is not yet launched in N8N, so they haven't built the node in N8N. That's why I'm going to build a custom HTTP request to make the API call to do this new service. If you're interested into this kind of automated video generation or this kind of N8N workflow, you can check out my other tutorial on this channel. I mainly build custom N8N workflows that help you to automatically generate and upload videos to YouTube to make money. You can also explore more of my services on my Patreon. So that's it for today. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Take care. Bye.